This time, for me, is very important because it's almost 50th years anniversary of commemorating man landing on the moon, the great Apollo program. It all started from a call to man landing on the moon by President John F. Kennedy.
No prejudice, no national conflict in outer space as yet. Its hazards are hostile to us all. Its conquest deserves the best of all mankind. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win.
Whenever I listen to that speech, still give me goosebumps, because I don't remember that speech because I was too young. 1961, I was only 6 years old. I was too young, but later on, when I flash back, when I watch the first man landed on the moon, really impacted my life. But Apollo program wasn't easy. The Apollo 1 was a disaster. If you remember, three astronauts was on the test flight. It wasn't even flight because the module was not on a rocket yet. They were just testing the command module, and that's what happened.
This is a CBS News special report.
This is Mike Wallace at the CBS Newsroom in New York. America's first 3 Apollo astronauts were trapped and killed by a flash fire that swept their moonship early tonight during a launch pad test at Cape Kennedy in Florida. Virgil Gus Grissom, 40 years old, one of the original Mercury astronauts, the first American astronaut to go twice into space. Edward White, 36 years old, the first American to walk in space. And rookie astronaut Roger Chaffee, 31 years old, training for his first space flight, Apollo 1, scheduled for February 21st. These 3 astronauts were aboard their spaceship 10 minutes from a simulated liftoff at Cape Kennedy when the fire hit at about 6:30 tonight. They were inside their spaceship, pressurized, buttoned up inside their spacesuits when the fire hit. A closed-circuit television camera was relaying pictures of the astronauts lying on their backs inside the spacecraft atop the 2-stage Saturn I. There was a flash, and that was it, according to a NASA spokesman watching the television screen in the blockhouse a few hundred yards away from Launch Pad 34. The screen went blank, and he said there was no communication from the astronauts. They died silently and apparently swiftly. Their bodies have been left in the spacecraft, according to the latest information from the Cape, pending an investigation into the disaster. President Johnson tonight mourned the death of the 3 astronauts. He said they gave their lives in the nation's service. Our brave men in uniform, whether in Vietnam or seeking the frontiers of the future, he said, mourn with all of us the tragic loss of 3 gallant and dedicated airmen.
Well, actually, was not 100% accurate. Later on, they found a recording tape, and the astronaut was asking for help from the capsule. So there is a bad fire. Get us out of here. But at that time, the design of the capsule was pressurized, so the hatch actually has 3 layers. When it's pressurized, there's no way to open up the hatch. And the astronaut was breathing pure oxygen. So the whole capsule was full of pure oxygen. So when there was a fire, there was no way to stop it. That's only 3 minutes, all 3 astronauts were burned down to death. And especially at that time, the spacesuit at that time was combustible, it's flammable, made of nylon. So caught on fire very quickly. And these 3 Apollo 1 astronauts gave their life. Especially, they knew what will happen to them. They were jokingly actually pray for the capsule, pray before, in front of the capsule. Hopefully the capsule will work. But out of the ash of the tragedy came the Apollo Prayer League with a mission to land a Bible on the moon in Ed White's name. Ed White, the commander of that flight, had a wish. One day, he will be able to bring a Bible on the moon. So the Apollo Prayer League actually is in Webster, in a church very close, near to our church. And they have formed Apollo Prayer League to pray for astronauts, pray for all the ground engineers, and of course, pray for the program. And their goal is one day they will land a Bible on the moon. So subsequent flight, you probably heard that. From Apollo 1 disaster, the next one you probably heard is Apollo 8. Well, actually, there are some intermediate testing flight, but like Apollo 4, 5, 6 are unmanned. Apollo 2 and 3 were canceled. And out of them, one of very important tests is if a capsule is mounted on top, you may see that. That's a capsule, command capsule, is mounted on top of a rocket. That's a Saturn V rocket. In case there is something emergency, how this astronaut can get out from the rocket. So they invented an escape rocket, put on top of the capsule. So we'll lift the capsule away from the rocket. And fortunately, we never need to use it, but that was the plan. So you will see that even on the Saturn V moon landing rocket, on top of it there's a small rocket, and that is what it is. And another thing that's very important is how to make the astronaut EVA suit non-flammable. Because in the Apollo 1 test, they found out it was made of nylon, flammable nylon. It just burned out quickly. So Dr. Frederick Dawn was the one given that task. So he invented called beta fabric, and it's totally non-flammable. Dr. Fred Dawn eventually became the chief engineer of the Johnson Space Center. And when he passed away, Johnson Space Center sent a airplane, a jet fly over the Johnson Space Center and carry a flag, American flag. And that brought that flag back and in his funeral. And he's a member of my church. So Apollo 7, 8, 9, 10, these are manned spaceflight. Apollo 8, we know more about it, and we'll talk more about it. And Apollo 10 is a dress rehearsal. They actually went to the moon and orbited the moon, but did not really land. And Apollo 8 is the first human flight left Earth and went into moon's orbit and orbited the moon and did not land, but that's a test flight. And Apollo 8 mission in 1968 is very memorable because from Apollo 8, there is a broadcast directly from the moon. The first human broadcast from the moon to the Earth. And 3 astronauts, Jim Lovett, William Anders, and Frank Borman, they took turn when they come out from the backside of the moon, and they saw this picture, and the Earth rising. And they are so moved, they start to read.
We are now approaching lunar sunrise, and for all the people back on Earth, the crew of Apollo 8 has a message that we would like to send to you. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. And God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters. Let it divide the waters from the waters." And God made the firmament, and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. And God called the firmament heaven. And the evening and the morning were the second day. God said, "Let the waters under the heaven be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas. And God saw that it was good. And from the crew of Apollo 8, we close with good night, good luck, a Merry Christmas, and God bless all of you on the good earth.
This broadcast actually won Emmy Award. Only 50 seconds, won Emmy Award. Because there are some more listeners and listening and watching this broadcast than any other broadcast. And that's the moment. And the moment was on 1968, December 24th, Christmas Eve, a night of peace. And as a result, U.S. Postal Service have commemorate that event, has published a stamp and as well as the envelope. On that stamp, clearly printed 4 words in the beginning, God. If you like to see that stamp, I collected some. Let me pass it on. Then from Apollo 9 and Apollo 10 are mainly dress rehearsal for the real landing. And that's Apollo 9 to test. One of very important part is how do you put this command module and lunar module or pack them together in a rocket. And command module actually is on the top, this one, this section. And lunar module is the second stage, it's over here. So they do need to test the technology. So at the middle of flight, have the command module go out and turn around and dock with the lunar module and extract it out. And these two together will fly to the moon. So that's the technology they were testing. It was successful, and then finally we have Apollo 11. And 3 astronauts, Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins, and Buzz Aldrin, and they landed in the Apollo 11 landing site. Tranquility Base, Eagle has landed. And first man landed on the moon. Neil Armstrong said, "One small step for man and one giant step for mankind." And that is the broadcast.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
And then they landed on the moon. And the commander, Neil Armstrong, is the first one stepped out from the lunar module Eagle. And Buzz Aldrin was second. But actually, there was a time lapse from the time they landed on the moon to the time they actually stepped out of the lunar module. They landed on the moon on July 20th. It's about 10 o'clock. And they actually stepped out from the lunar module about 2 o'clock to 2:30 on the second day. So it's July 21st. So when did man landed on the moon? You can say both. But during that time, what did they do? Of course, they do some preparation work, and they did have a meal. And then what is the first meal on the lunar surface? Buzz Aldrin, he himself actually is an elder of a Webster Presbyterian Church, a church very close to my church. So he asked his pastor, what will be the most meaningful way to commemorate the event when humans landed on the moon? So they bounced the idea back and forth. Finally, they settled on taking the communion, the first communion. The first meal on the moon is Holy Communion. So his pastor gave him a kit, a real silver chalice and bread. They are allowed to take some of those personal items in a very small bag, only about this size. So that's his personal items. He actually jotted down some notes. That's what he's going to read. Before asking the communion, Adrian silently read the passage from the Bible, which he had handwritten in a piece of paper. Can we read them together? There are 2 verses. I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever remains in me and I in you will bear much fruit, for you can do nothing without me. John 15:5. And what is man that thou art mindful of him, and the son of a man that thou visitest him? Psalm 8. So the first meal taken on the moon is Holy Communion. And at the time when Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong on the lunar surface, Michael Collins is orbiting the moon. And because you have to have someone up there to take you back, right? So Michael Collins, although in that mission, he did not have the chance actually landed on the moon. So Michael Collins was orbiting the moon in this command module, and while this lunar lander landed on the moon. But when the lunar lander landed on the moon, they brought a message to the moon to all humankind. Here is a plaque, actually etched on the one leg of the lunar lander. And here said, here man from the planet Earth first set foot upon the moon, July 1969 AD, Anno Domini, the year of our Lord. And we came in peace for all mankind. How do we, mankind, can really have peace? I think one verse can say it all. Ephesians 2:14. For he himself is our peace, who has made us both one and has broken down in his flesh the dividing wall of hostility. He himself is our peace, our eternal peace. Then after Apollo 11, there's some faith-oriented activity keep going on. One is what we just recall, the Apollo Prayer League. And they want to commemorate Ed White, his sacrifice. And Ed White always want to bring the first Bible to the moon. So they thought about what can be done so that the Bible will be small enough and put into such a small bag. So eventually, they contacted NCR. NCR is an expert to making microfiche. So they were able to condense the whole King James Bible in one microfiche about this size. And that's what we call the first lunar Bible. They did try in Apollo 12. But for some reason, when they put all the things on the lunar lander and command module, and that the first lunar Bible was left in the command module. So yes, indeed, it was orbiting the moon all the time, but did not land it on the moon. So in Apollo 12 program. Then what happened in Apollo 13? They actually brought that on Apollo 13 too. So the lunar Bible was on Apollo 13. But unfortunately, Apollo 13 never landed on the lunar surface. It was a disaster, but we thank God, and we were able to bring 3 astronauts back safely. Even at the time, and President Richard Nixon went on national TV and asked all people to pray for our astronaut. And finally, the lunar Bible did land, finally landed on the moon in February 5th, 1971, an Apollo 14 program. And this time they remembered to put their lunar Bible on the lunar module and then landed on the moon. There are about 360 copies of that. So sometimes if you search eBay from time to time, you can still see a copy on auction. Apollo program did impact a lot of lives. One of the astronauts in Apollo 15 is a lunar module pilot, James Irwin. James Irwin, he himself admits that he's not such a devoted Christian, he's a nominal Christian. But after the lunar mission, Apollo mission, there was a lot of problems, and then when he prayed, he did really experience the presence of God, of Jesus Christ. So after he came back, guess, he became an evangelist. So he actually set up a foundation around the world and shared Apollo program moon landing experience, especially the experience he's encountering of God on the moon. Last but not least is Apollo program's inspiration on a 14-year-old boy, 50 years ago. And that 14-year-old boy was watching a TV. His household is kind of poor, did not even own a TV. So went to a neighbor, and the neighbor was very nice, allowed him to stand over there to watch the TV. So for the first time, the man landed on the moon, and Neil Armstrong stepped on the moon, said, "One small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind." He was so touched. He had a secret wish. One day, if he can work in that organization. But at the time, it was almost impossible. That's a stupid dream to him. Taiwan is a country that didn't have a space program. Taiwan was a country constantly under the threat of being attacked by mainland China. But that same year, he went with his fellow boys and girls in the church fellowship, the church youth fellowship. Went to a gathering. In the gathering, they were showing a Christian movie. And the movie name is called Queen of Dark Chamber. It's a biography of a lady born in late Qing dynasty and became evangelist. Interesting thing is she is almost totally blind, cannot see light. Just in his dark room, he has led hundreds and hundreds of people to Christ. And the movie wasn't that well made, frankly speaking, but the movie was very touching. So at the end of the movie, a pastor extended altar call. First altar call, who wants to accept Jesus Christ as their Savior? Many people raise their hand. The second altar call, who wants to devote his life and to serve the Lord in full time? That 14-year-old boy raised his hand and stepped out. But the things didn't go smoothly immediately. Frankly speaking, that boy, not for too long, didn't forget about that calling, but put it aside. But he gets a chance. When he was about 25 years old, 27 years old, he had a chance to come to this great country, United States, to pursue his dream, get his PhD degree, and amazingly, after he got his PhD degree, he applied for 50 jobs, got only 2 offers. One offer is from NASA. He worked very hard in NASA for 14 years and gradually advanced to a leadership position and started 8 robotics labs and was in charge of a group of about 40 engineers and scientists. Then at the age of 45 years old, he heard that calling again. Did you forget about what you had promised when you were 14 years old? He was shocked. He said, wow, God gave me this opportunity to come to this country to fulfill my dream when I was 14 years old. How can I not respond to his call when I was also 14 years old? And that boy, you know by now, that's me. And thank you very much for allowing me this opportunity to share with you how God has called me, how I love this country. I love this country, frankly speaking, for 2 main reasons. One, it's a Christian country. This country was founded by Christian values. And most of the astronauts, engineers, and scientists in NASA back then were Christians, tell you the truth. Most of my colleagues, they were Christians. The second thing, this country attracted me so much, is that you can dream a big dream. And one day, you can achieve that dream. Let's pray. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for time we can contemplate on the 50th anniversary of man landing on the moon. When we look at the sky and the heaven and earth, how great thou art. We thank you for we are able to serve in this ministry, to declare, to proclaim your name, Jesus Christ, to the world. We thank you. We pray in Jesus Christ's name. Amen. Thank you.